Let me begin by asking some of you. I don't know how long I'm supposed to be up here. I just know I'm not supposed to take the whole 3 hours. But with the subject that I have, I could easily. But what I will say is I don't come to you as an expert. So don't expect for me to have all of the answers. I came here to have a conversation with you because we all share in this experience. The whole idea of caring for somebody. Let me start by asking, by a show of hands, how many of you are caring for someone right now or has had the experience of caring for someone? Oh, how many have not? Just 2. And so we can see just how valuable and how necessary a conversation like this is. Now, I'm in the baby boomer generation, between 46 and 64. And from what I understand, there were about 76 million babies born during that time, just post-World War II, and I guess a lot of brothers and sisters were doing what they were doing. Okay. But it ended up with one of the largest populations in the United States. I think the silent years were before us, and then Generation X came after us. And I lift that up because it's our turn to die now. Baby boomers, it's our turn to die. It's our turn to be sick. It's our turn for our parents to die, for our parents to get sick, and for us to have to care for them. And so there's a huge need for conversations like this on caregiving. And I want to lift up grief with caregiving. Because there was a fellow, his name was John Patton. And John Patton said that grief, we usually understand grief at the time of death. But Dr. Patton stretched it out and said grief it comes with any limit or any loss. Any limit or any loss. And so divorce brings grief. Age brings grief. Whenever there's something that we used to be able to do and we cannot do it now, we may not realize it, but we grieve over that. I've got a flight of stairs in the house where my wife and I live, and I used to be able to run up those steps, but now I have to pause halfway and take a breath and then go the rest of the way. Time brings about a change, and anytime there's a loss or there's a limit, then there's grief. Let me say this. While I don't come as an expert, I do come as a person who is a caregiver presently. Right now, I just dropped my wife off so that I could come and hang out with everybody here. Now, let me say this. On Sunday morning, when it's my turn to preach, okay, I'll do all of the talking. I don't want this to be a monologue. I want this to be a dialogue, okay? I don't want to do all of the talking. I want to hear from you. And so if there's any time you want to chime in, please do so. And there will be times when I will ask questions. And when I do, they're not rhetorical. I am really looking for someone to answer. And I do have a finger, and I can point too, So I'm asking for any kind of help. We can all help each other. My wife has a disease that has been called terminal. It's a very rare disease. It's called scleroderma, and usually it works from the inside out. The thing that's so crazy about my wife, her symptoms are all over the place. It took us about 3 years to figure out just exactly what was wrong. They diagnosed her with all kinds of things. And it was by accident that we went to a rheumatologist, and the rheumatologist finally hit the nail on the head. My wife, most of the time you see her, you would not know that she's ill. Unless you've been knowing her for a while, you know that she's lost a lot of weight. Most people thinks that she has cancer, but she does not. She has this rare autoimmune disease that's called scleroderma. Because of her disease process, it does affect the skin, and scleroderma, I believe, is a Greek word. And it's a compound word, sclera and derma. Sclera means hardening. Derma means skin. And so what happens is scleroderma hardens your skin. In my wife's particular case, she has scleroderma of the gut, and so it's starting in her digestive tract. So a lot of her symptoms are associated with her digestive tract. It ended up, where we are now, my wife has 2 tubes, okay? One in her stomach and the other one in her, what is it, Clay? It's in what? In her small intestine. I refer to Clay. Clay happens to be a very close friend, and he also happens to be our primary care physician. And because of that, that requires a lot of maintenance on my part. Those tubes have to be cleaned, and there's a lot of work on my part. Those of you who have been caregivers, give me one person. Tell me what the disease process or the ailment is or was for the person you were caring for. Lung cancer. Is that person still with us? Okay. Were you there when the person passed away? You were there when the person actually passed away. How many of us have been there when our loved one actually took their last breath? I consider that as one of the holiest moments that a person can experience. Everybody doesn't get that opportunity. We can be connected, and not just in a physical sense, but we can be connected emotionally, and we can also be connected spiritually. And like I said, I'm a Christian. Let me ask this question. How many of us in here today are not Christian? You might be Muslim, or you might approach God in some other way other than the Christian religion. So all of us are Christians. So I feel free now to use Christian language and use my God language. Because with God, there's no way that I could do or go through what we're going through. One of the first things that I will lift up as it relates to caregiving is you need a living will or an advance directive. You need to have that conversation. It might not be a pleasant conversation because we don't want mama to go. We don't want our husbands to go. But the actual reality is none of us are going to leave here without dying. Each one of us, sooner or later, is going to leave here. And so it's best to prepare. And one of the ways to prepare is to do our advance directives early. Can you imagine what it would be like? I had a 47-year-old female African American at university to come into the hospital under full arrest. She was the breadwinner for the house. She was all there was to it. She had a husband that loved her, but she was just the dominant personality in not only their relationship, but in the family. She passed away. When she passed away, nobody knew what to do. She at first was on a ventilator, and when the doctors came in and asked about removing her from the ventilator, here they were already in the throes of an emotional frenzy, and now this heavy question that comes along: who in the world wants to take their loved one off life support? Who in the world wants to do that? You know, it makes you feel like you're killing the person. You're giving up on the person. I'm going to defer to Clay and Jeff on that. What I will say is this. I'm a board-certified chaplain, and we have dealt with a lot of grief. And that's one of the reasons why I bring up an advance directive, because if you do your advance directive, then your loved ones won't have to struggle with making those decisions. Life is still more valuable than money to a lot of people. To a lot of people it's not, but to a lot of people, life is still more valuable than money. And for us to see a person who we love leave this life and enter into the next life, you know, and as a Christian, I will say this. If there's anybody that ought to be able to handle life, it ought to be us. If there's anybody that ought to be able to handle death, it ought to be us. There are many scriptures, and I could easily put on my preacher hat here now and start lifting up the idea. To die is to gain. It doesn't feel like it, but the reality is to die is actually to gain. Sometimes we'll see it as a loss, but in reality, it's not a loss. We get so comfortable in this world, and I could spend a lot of time there, but I'm not going to. There's some much smarter guys coming after me that will be able to ask questions about that also. But what I do want to say is this. When you're spending time caring for someone, you get tired. Sometimes you get so tired that you wish you didn't have to do it. I cannot tell you how many times I have been to the Lord, and I was praying on my way here. And I love God, and I know that God is at work in my life, but I still sometimes wish that God would do something about my situation. I mean, I'm just laying my cards on the table. My wife is a wonderful lady, and I love her with all my heart. But she wakes me up in the middle of the night, all day, day long. Chris, 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 Chris. And people, everybody thinks that the circumstance that you are in is worse than everybody else's. And while mine may not be, mine is hard. There was one point in our relationship, because of my wife's digestive tract, she couldn't go in public at all because she had no control. People look at you and they say, oh, that's just a cop-out. He don't want to come. He's just using his wife as a cop-out because she doesn't look like she's as sick as she is. It was about 3 years ago now. We got the word that my wife was not expected to make it through the rest of the week. And so I said, well, hey, if it's God's will, it's God's will. I'm a Christian. She's a Christian. However God wants to do it, let God do it. And God decided, nope, not the end of this week. And here it is 3 years later. And she's still with us. And she has her ups and she has her downs. The point that I'm trying to make is caring for people, you can burn out. I don't think anybody loves God more than me. Might be some love God better. But I don't think there's anybody that loves God more than I do. And I don't think there's anybody who loves their spouse more than I do. But I get tired. I'm not tired this morning, but I get tired. In the little pamphlet that I put together, there's a little section in there on caregiver burnout. I want to encourage you to look at that. And there's also a life stress test that I put in. Dr. Tim Lowenstein put that together, and with their permission, I put it in there. I hope that you will find some time to fill out this stress test, to just take a look at your life. I have been stressed and did not know I was stressed. You can get so into what you're doing and be so driven by what you're doing. I was stressed and I didn't even know it. And there's a where you can look at your scores and see just where you are personally. I would encourage you for your loved ones to make copies of this and share it with those who you feel might be interested in this and who might be helped in some way or another. Well, the Bible says laughter does good like a medicine. And I didn't realize it at the time, but we had a standing deal where whenever I would go to the doctor, I had to have a joke and the doctor had to have a joke for me. And so we would go in, and we would crack jokes. It would get on my wife's nerves because both of us got dry jokes. I mean, I am not funny, and neither is he. I told him stick with his day job. And I laughed my stress away. I had no idea what he was doing. But he has this, because he's a minister, he has this gift of integrating spirituality with medicine. And he dispensed laughter. And I came in, and I had to be prepared with a joke. And so did he. And sometimes I laughed because it wasn't funny. But it worked. I was telling one of the members of our church, I had a physician to tell me to go and do something that you don't have to do. I was working 2 jobs. I was in seminary, and I was pastoring a congregation. I was stressed, and I did not know it. I was so busy. And he told me that what I needed to do, I didn't need any pills or any shots, but what I needed to do was to go and do something that I didn't have to do. And the wisdom in that was, in order to do something, you have to not do something. And he knew that if I did something, I would have to not do something else. I went and bought an old truck and started working on the truck. And it took up so much of my time that I was not able to do a lot of the stuff that was stressing me out without me knowing it. The times that we live in where we multitask and we just stay busy, and we're constantly doing things. And we can get to a place where we're comfortable and not realize just how stressed we actually are. I put death in 2 categories: a good death and a bad death. A bad death is when either the person who is dying or the person's context is dysfunctional. When there's a lot of anger, a lot of stress, that's a bad death. A good death, I remember I was a hospice chaplain, and I had this, I think he was 63, male white guy down in Mississippi, who was actively dying. Actively dying is when you are in the process, but you're not quite there yet. The wife called. They called the chaplain, wanted the chaplain to go over to the house. I went to the house. Now, no disrespect to my cameraman friend right here, but I'm just going to tell it like it is. Racism is alive and well in the South. I had to go to these white folk house. They were in Mississippi, and homeboy was kind of uneasy about going in that house. I knew that she had 3 sons that were big, burly guys. When I got to the house, no one was there but the wife and her husband, who was actively dying. I'm wondering, what is it going? I mean, I'm being a chaplain and all of that, but at the same time, I'm kind of scoping out my situation here and making preparations just in case. And when I got in the house, they had prepared a room for the patient. The wife took me in the room, and she would not let my hand go. That bothered me even more. When those boys came in, they came in one by one. Some had wives and families, and one guy came in by himself. They had so much respect for me. They came, they gathered around their dad's body. One of them got a chair for their mother and put the chair right by the bed. And ladies, y'all have a way of snuggling that men can't do. And she was sitting in that chair, and somehow she got up in her husband's chest, and she started talking to him. Baby, we're all here. We're fine. If you want to, you can go ahead. And while she was talking, that man died. That is a good death. I had a patient who was 83 years old, African American female. I don't remember what her disease was now, but she was in the bed. She was kind of aware. She was and she wasn't at the same time. But the thing that struck me about this situation is that child's mama was there. Her mama was sitting, patient 83. Her mama was there, sitting in a rocking chair by the window. The patient was laying in the bed. Mama, mama, mama. Her mama said, baby, you calling on me. There's nothing I can do. You need to call on the Lord. She started calling on the Lord. Lord, Lord. And she died. That's just how good God has been to me. To allow me to be present at times like that. So, do I see it differently? Oh, yes. I'm not going to tell you about some of the bad deaths that I've experienced. We can be horrible as people. And we grieve in some of the craziest ways. And what we need to do is we need to understand that even though the behavior, as a matter of fact, the story that I told you about the guy whose brother was trying to sue him, that was a bad death. But there were those that were involved that understood what was going on, and they were able to make it through the process themselves and to be with those two brothers, even though they were so angry with them and what have you. When you asked the question, I thought when I was doing on call in the hospital, during a 24-hour period, I had 14 deaths. You You don't treat them all the same. There was some of the deaths where when I got to the room, the patient had already passed and there was no family. There was a lady that was in university on the 7th floor in the tower who had been in the hospital 74 days and had not had one visitor except the chaplain. When she passed away, nobody was with her. That was a bad death. May have been good for her because she was a Christian woman and we talked about God, boy. But nobody, no family was with her. And I'll say this, and I hate to even say it, but when her son came to the hospital after she had passed away, that boy was a Baptist preacher. That was one of those times when I'm from South Memphis too, Doc. I'm from Castalia. I'm Castalia Heights, Doc. You know. So yes, and I think we all do. I think that when it's a good death, we can rejoice and we can be happy and we can have mama with us all of the time. But when mama has been a booger bear, or when I have been I'll share a bad death with you. I just thought of one. There was a lady came in the ED at Methodist North. She came in under full arrest, and I found out later that what had stressed her out was her daughter had been to the house and had asked her mother for something, and mama said no. She cussed mama out, slammed the door on the way out, and mama had a heart attack, and mama died. Brother had already tried to get some money out of mama for his drugs, and what he did, he stole towels, he took a picture off the wall, took food out of the deep freezer so that he could sell it and get something to get high off of. When both of them got to the hospital, there was no consoling them, because it was not just grief, it was also guilt. That was a bad death, and it was a bad death in a number of ways. That little girl, she was smaller than you, and she was a young girl, and there's a plate glass window that's outside of the chapel there at Methodist North. She put her fist through a plate glass window, a stained glass window, I'm sorry.